Good morning, everyone. I too am excited about this series of lessons since Sister Kristen taught that first one, Small Things That Built Civilization. And I thought, man, I'm going to come back for some of that. We try to split our time in between here and the the Overcomers class, I think it is. So this week I get a call from Brother Jordan. He's asking me, he says, I need you to teach next month. Pick a date. And man, I'm sitting here looking at these lessons, and I said, he's going to have to wait. I ain't planning on being, so I picked the 31st of next month so I could try to get all these that I could. I missed last week. We were out of town, but we're back again here this morning, and thankful for that. I actually, whenever Brother Sister Beers texted us and said, here's some lessons, and y'all pick which one you want. I looked through and I picked this one. And I said, hey, if you don't mind, I'd like to teach this one. And they said, well, that's the one we had picked out for you. So maybe I'm walking right in the will of the Lord here today. Covenant builds commitment. We're going to talk about why strong societies are built on loyalty, not preference. How the erosion of covenant thinking weakens everything from families to churches to the very nations that we live in. Our key scripture here this morning is found in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 9. And it reads, Know therefore that the Lord thy God, he is God, the faithful God, which keepeth covenant and mercy with them that love him and keep his commandments to a thousand generations. And Jesus speaking in Matthew chapter 5, verse 37 said, let your yes be yes and your nay, nay. King James Version says it this way, let your communications be yea, yea, nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. God is a covenant-keeping God. It began in Genesis, the book of Genesis, until the continued book of Acts, which we continue living today. He created humanity to flourish within covenants, not contracts, but covenants. When we treat our relationships like transactions, we sever the cords, we sever the bonds that hold together families, that hold together churches, again, that holds together entire civilizations together. The idea of this lesson this morning is simply to reclaim covenant thinking. Get rid of the stinking thinking, get covenant thinking. And when we do so, we will rebuild trust, and it'll provide stability, and it'll establish a legacy. In generations past, a man's word was binding. Handshake could close a deal. In the late 40s, my dad and my grandfather left Poplarville, Mississippi. They took a train and they headed to California, where many of our other family members, their family members were, still are today. So en route, the train stopped in Orange, Texas. They had never been to Texas. Dad was probably 16, 17 years of age. And so they stopped in Orange, and somebody got on the train with a basket of chicken. And Dad said told me this story. He said, son, I was about to starve to death. I was already so hungry when this person got on that train with a basket of chicken that they had gotten from the Capistrano restaurant, because the old Capistrano is still standing there on the other side of the tracks in Orange, and the old train station is still standing. So when they got on board, he asked that conductor, he said, do we have time? Just let me, he said, you better hurry, son, for this train's going to pull out. So Dad run. That's his first step into Texas. So he run and got a basket of chicken. They get on the train, get back on the train to go to California, work for a bit. Their house burns down. The family home burnt down. And so discouraged, they loaded back up, came back to Poplarville, Mississippi. Work was still scarce, so my granddad loaded up and came to Orange, to this place where they had first stopped. And he was a carpenter building scaffolds and such. He went on from there to start his own business. Being a contractor, he He specialized in the old asbestos siding. Some of you guys know what I'm talking about, the old asbestos siding they used to put on houses, and also on composition roofs, residential homes. My dad followed in his steps, and I did for a time, followed in my dad's steps. My dad and I always had a signed contract before we began work. We had everything itemized out, exactly what we were going to do. The owner signed it, we signed it, and we worked according to the contract. But my grandfather, he never had a contract. He was old school, the old generation. He would discuss with the owner the work he was going to do in detail. They would agree on a price, and he placed a seal on his word with a firm handshake. This is what we're going to do, and they sealed it that way. Generations past, marriage vows were more sacred than what they are today. In other words, a marriage was highly valued, and it was important. And when a couple took their marriage vows, they took on a sacred responsibility to one another. Church membership was for life. I remember hearing Brother J.T. Pugh or reading what he said. He said it used to be when a family would come into the church that your goal was to win the father. Because if you won the father, then you got the rest of the family, and you had them for life. Today, he said, it may be second, third, whatever marriage, and it would be a lot of times it would be his children, her children, their children, and if you got at least one of them from the group, you felt blessed and fortunate and was able to keep them. When I was coming up, the only way you changed churches was your family relocated because of a job or circumstances beyond our control, such as my brother was involved in a terrible car accident at 6 years old, and the doctors got him into the Hewan School in Port Arthur, and so we moved from Louisiana to, that's how I got here to this part of the country. Today, almost everything is disposable. Disposable. Listen to that word. Everything today seems to be disposable. Disposable it's designed to be used once or only a limited number of times, and then it's thrown away, like disposable diapers or gals, disposable razors. Disposable jobs. I talked to you about my life early on. I used to kind of guilty of this one. Before going to work to the company I'm with now, I used to go to my tax person with about half a dozen or more W-2s and different jobs that I had throughout the year. I'd leave a job at the drop of a hat because I had somewhat of a temper and didn't go to suit. I knew where I could find another job. Or they were paying a dollar an hour more down the road, I'd cut out and go because I'm trying to feed my family as such. And in fact, as a matter of one of the guys who was going to hire me where I'm at now, he advised the other manager to not hire me because of my habits. A friend of mine, now he advised my other friend not to hire me because of my past habits. And fortunately, they did hire me. I'm going on 22 years of service with the company that I'm with now. Disposable friendships, people look at them. See, the attitude of today, the day is what have you done for me lately? Not what our friendship has been and what has happened in our past and what you've invested in me and our friendship and what we've gone through. But what have you done for me lately? And some little thing happened along life's way, and in that friendship that has been there for many years just be cut off, be disposed of. Church attendance the same way. And unfortunately, even marriages are disposable. Today's society doesn't speak in the language of covenant. They speak in the language of preference. I'll stay as long as it works out for me. I'll love you unless it's just cost me too much. I'll serve, but not if I become uncomfortable as such. And yet, the very deepest parts of us, we long for something that's more concrete, something that is foundational, that's enduring in these times. We don't want to be picked for convenience. We want to be loved in covenant. So let's break this down, how we lost covenant thinking, got to the stinking thinking of today's. So from covenant to consumerism. Consumer culture trains us to make choices based on convenience, not on commitment. If a product or even a person no longer serves us or our means or what we want, we move on or we simply discard it. But a covenant isn't based on usefulness. Covenant is based on faithfulness. Consumerism asks, what am I going to get out of this? What is it in it for me before we even start? But covenant asks, what have I promised to give? So in this hour that we're living in, it's heartbreaking, the rise of disposable relationships. Marriage is now seen by many as optional or even temporary. Went to Dr. Google while I was studying, and he said that in 1960, and if my son-in-law was here, he'd go, "Dad, those are really old statistics." But in 1960, 2/3 of all 20-somethings were married. That's 68% of 20-something-year-olds were all married. 2008, just 26% were. And it's a question of how many of today's youth will eventually get married. About half of all adults in this country were married in 2008. That's 52%. Back in 1960, 7 in 10 were married, 72%. So the question was asked, is marriage becoming obsolete? Nearly 4 in 10 survey respondents, 39% say that marriage is becoming obsolete, discarded, as it were. In 1978, when Time magazine posed this question to registered voters, just 28% agreed. And so I began to look at the definition of a family. By emphatic margins, the public does not see marriage as the only path to family formation. In fact, fully 86% say a single parent and a child constitute a family. Near as many as 80% say an unmarried couple living together with a child is a family. And 63% say a gay or lesbian couple raising a child is a family. So the presence of children clearly matters in these definitions. But if a cohabiting couple living without being married and they have no children, a majority of the public says that's not a family. Marriage matters as well. If a childless couple is married, 88% consider them to be a family. Friendships are often abandoned, as I said, over disagreements. What have you done for me lately? Church hopping in the day and hour we're living in is common. We just got back from the Grand Tetons, and we stayed in Idaho. So we had friends of ours about an hour or so in Wyoming that had a church. We were looking to see what other churches were in Idaho, and I got on the UPC website, and there was less than 30 churches in the whole state of Idaho. If you drop a pin anywhere around us here in the South, you'll have more than 30 apostolic churches within a 50-mile radius of you. And I was over an hour to the closest one we were. So I would just say, geographically, church hopping is common. They stay until the preaching or the music or people disappoint you, and then they move on to the next one. It's heartbreaking rise of disposable relationships. It weakens people's identity. It destroys trust, undermines spiritual formation. Why? Because transformation requires staying put even when it's hard. I'm reminded of the Old Testament character who had a field of lentils, and my redneck would say black-eyed or purple hull peas, but he had a patch of peas, as it were, and the enemy had attacked him so many times and taken from Israel so many times what they had that he finally made up his mind one day. He said, I'm not leaving this pea patch one more time. I'm going to stand right here and I'm going to fight. I'm going to stay here and I'm going to be formed. I want to be transformed. In fact, the writer of Romans, Paul, says, and so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. Let them, that is your bodies, be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind that he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. Don't copy the behavior and the customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way that you think. That's stinking thinking. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. I'd like to share with you something I read, and just for reference, I'm not a psychologist. I don't even have a college degree. Go check with Pastor Carr if you need a psychologist as such. But anyway, it struck a chord with me when I read this. It said this: emotional resilience and relational health are built in safe, long-term attachments. Breaking those attachments too often leads to anxiety, insecurity, and identity confusion. We have evolved from oaths to options, and historically, as I exemplified by the previous account of my grandfather, my dad, vows and covenants are binding. They were binding. They should be binding, even verbal ones. But today, contracts are written to allow exit. I have a gentleman in our company down the hall from me in our office whose full-time job is to review contracts, to catch the red line the gotchas that other companies will try to put over on you. An exit strategy, something to get you, something to make you pay instead of them pay. There's prenuptial agreements, there's early terminations, there's easy out clauses, all reflect the same mindset. I might stay or I might not stay. My wife and I, we know other married couples who have his and her bank accounts. And if you do that, I'm not judging, I'm just telling you from my lesson what I'm teaching here today. But they have his account, her account, his money, her money. And as I was talking to you about marriage, there's got to be a covenant between the two. There's got to be a trust factor. Now, if you go out and eat with us and you overhear me ask my wife, are you paying or I got to pay for this? We may have several bank accounts, not much money in either one of them or any of them, but the deal of it is it's an inside joke with us. It's really not who's paying. It's simply the matter of who's pulling out the money card, because it all comes from the same place anyways. When everyone is always halfway out the door, no one feels safe. The modern lifestyle today offers constant alternatives. We scroll past our relationships and causes, even spiritual truth. The way it's set up now and what we see, it's a buffet of options, and this buffet of options that is there, it feeds restlessness. Covenant, on the other hand, says, I'm chosen, and I have chosen. I'm rooted, and I'm not going anywhere. I like that man from the Old Testament. I've left this pea patch my last time. This is where I am staying. All meaningful growth happens after the feelings of wanting to leave. As he stated at the beginning, God is a covenant-keeping God. He began in the book of Genesis until continued book of Acts today. He created humanity to flourish within covenants, not contracts. Genesis, God made a covenant with Adam and Eve. It's called the Adamic covenant not Adamic, but Adamic covenant, or the covenant of works, and allow them to live and thrive in the Garden of Eden. The Noahic covenant, or that was to Noah, it's a promise never to destroy earth again with water, with a flood. Abrahamic covenant, it's a foundational promise made to Abraham, promise from God to Abraham that he would multiply, he would give him descendants, and he would multiply them. He would give him land, he would give him blessings for all nations through his lineage. God's covenant with Israel is primarily the Mosaic covenant. It's a conditional agreement where God promised to bless and to protect and the Israelites as his chosen people, conditionally, if they obeyed his laws and commandments. Marriage is called a covenant. Malachi chapter 2, verse 14, you can read it for yourself. But God's covenant with marriage is witnessed by God himself. It highlights the seriousness of marital vows and the responsibility that comes with entering into a covenant relationship. The passage emphasizes that God is a witness to the marriage covenant, and breaking this covenant through unfaithfulness or the divorce is a betrayal of that sacred bond. Salvation comes through the new covenant. The new covenant refers to a new relationship with God, between God and all humanity. It's mediated by Jesus Christ and his shed blood. And this new covenant is characterized by God's promise to forgive sins, to restore fellowship with the believers, to write his laws on our hearts. This covenant is based on faith in Jesus' atoning sacrifice through his death and his burial and his resurrection. It offers a more personal and transformative relationship with God than the old covenant did, which was based on that Mosaic law. And we know we enter into that new covenant with him through his death, burial, and resurrection, through repentance and through baptism in his precious name. And then filling of the Holy Ghost, evidenced by speaking in other tongues, as the Spirit of God gives that utterance. God's very character is defined by a covenant. He does not leave. He does not forget. In fact, the writer of Hebrews penned it this way: for he has said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. Ladies and gentlemen, Jesus did not come to make a transaction. He came to establish an unbreakable relationship, sealed not with ink, but sealed with his own precious blood. And he's calling us this morning to mirror that kind of faithfulness. So all that being said, what is a covenant? What is a covenant? Covenant is a sacred binding agreement between two parties made in the presence of God with mutual responsibilities and lasting consequences. Covenants are a big deal in the Bible, as I read to you. Covenant is a special relationship where parties formally commit themselves to each other. It's not a transaction, but it's a deeply meaningful relationship. Covenant is an agreement where God invites us, he leads us, he freely binds himself to us. We respond as his gracious Spirit begins to lead us. We commit ourselves to him. King Jesus calls us to complete trust and complete surrender to his cause and to his wills. I spoke of the Israelites, the covenant. God called them in the desert of Mount Sinai. God delivered the Israelites out of Egypt by his mercy and his grace, and he committed himself to them. But in this relationship, he made it clear that he expected these people to walk with and to follow him. He expected them to fully obey him and carefully follow his commandments. Covenants like that, they're not just transactions where you make a deal based on some vague promises, somehow hope somebody, some way is going to follow up on it. In the Bible, God graciously offers covenants, but He calls for a covenant response from us. A whole life commitment to His covenant offers. Spoke of marriage and wedding vows. That's a good example. Think about a time when you went to a wedding ceremony. According to tradition, as a minister, we asked the husband-to-be or the groomsman, we asked him, say, "Will you take this woman to be your wife?" Promising before God, his family, friends, that he'll stay with her in sickness and health, prosperity and adversity, both as long as you both shall live. And then we turn to the bride and we ask her the same thing. And hopefully they say, "I do." Not like that one guy I heard said, "Yes, no, yes, no." You know, the good stuff, but not the bad stuff. Then we ask her, but then the marriage ceremony then, because we've asked before God, it becomes not a contract, but it becomes a covenant. It becomes an agreement between these two parties when they pledge themselves to each other. Again, it's not a transaction. It's two people enter into a deeply personal commitment to one another. Covenants like a wedding ceremony and covenants like the new covenant. It involves commitment. It involves confession, physical expression. Unlike a contract which is based on mutual benefit, it can be broken and it no longer suits you. When you're tired, you simply dispose of it. But a covenant is based on mutual commitment, even in hardships. A contract, as the chart on my friend was so gracious to help me write because I was running late. Contract is based on mutual benefit, but covenant is based on mutual sacrifice. A contract it can be voided if one party fails. But in a covenant, it's binding even when one fails. Aren't you thankful here this morning that in this new covenant, when you failed, that He didn't just break the covenant with you, that He offered His forgiveness and His mercy and His grace. In a contract, it ends when terms are unmet, but a covenant endures beyond our failures and feelings. Contract is a legal framework, but a covenant is a sacred relationship. Contract says, what do I get out of this? What's in it for me? Covenant says, what have I pledged to give back to Him? Covenant relationships require faithfulness over time, endurance. Covenant relationships require trust through our trials. Covenant relationships require forgiveness when someone else fails. Forgiveness when you fail, to forgive yourself and to move on. Covenant relationships require intention to reflect God's nature. So whether it is in marriage or ministry, whether it's in church, whether it's in friendship, covenant thinking says, I am not with you because it's easy. I'm with you because I gave my word. And like my old granddad with a handshake, my word is for real. I close with this. Covenant thinking builds strength, not just in individuals, but in entire cultures. It's how nations are held together. It's how churches grow strong. It's how legacies are formed. While the world may keep chasing convenience, we're called to be people of promise. And because God never left us, He never forsook us, we are to be most like Him when we stay put, we stay faithful, we stay in His will. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen.